Hi, this is Nancy Yearout, and welcome to my show, High Road to Humanity. In every episode, I tell you powerful true stories filled with great wisdom that you can use in your own life as you strive for a higher road to travel. My featured guests will have their own unique stories to tell that enlighten your mind and your soul. So kick back, relax, and learn the secret to success when you take the high road.
First touch, strong connection, it lays deep in your soul.
Hi, this is Nancy Yearout, and welcome to High Road to Humanity. And I have a lovely lady here today. Kathryn Ford is here, and she's a medical doctor. And, we're going to talk. She specializes, listen to this, you guys. She specializes in teaching people how to be a couple. Okay. She says it's hard through her unique method called, and hopefully I'm pronouncing this right, is it Aperture Awareness?
Yes, excellent.
Aperture Awareness. Okay. Dr. Ford guides couples to stay in the present moment. Okay. What she explains is the key to successful relationships. The present moment is where learning, growth, and reconnection always happens. So welcome to High Road to Humanity today.
Thanks, Nancy. It's great to be here.
I'm really glad you're joining me. You're my first relationship person, so this will be really interesting for the audience. You guys got to share this show, and if you want some information, she's got some really interesting stuff here that we're going to talk about. Before I get into it all, I did pull this today. Here's the headline: Germany announces nationwide lockdown for the unvaccinated. And I just have to bring this to people's attention because you need to know what's going on around the world. This actually came from CNN. Berlin, Germany on Thursday announced a nationwide lockdown for the unvaccinated as its leaders backed plans for mandatory vaccination in the coming months. It says unvaccinated people will be banned from accessing all but the most essential businesses, such as supermarkets and pharmacies, to curb the spread of coronavirus. Outgoing Chancellor Angela Merkel and her successor Olaf Scholz announced Thursday following crisis talks with regional leaders. Now, this is a big deal. So the pair also backed proposals for mandatory vaccines, which, if voted through the parliament, could take effect from February at the earliest. Under the tightened restrictions, unvaccinated people can only meet two people from another household. Bars and nightclubs must shut down in areas which an incident rate of above 350 cases per 100,000 people over 1 week, and the country would limit the number of people at large events like soccer matches. I just think it's a scary thing, when we're doing this kind of stuff. Do you want to say anything about this? What do you think, Kathryn?
More and more, I think that it's interesting because I think that my emphasis with couples is always on how can you have the best conversations, especially when you start out in different places. And more, I think that, the whole planet clearly right now is in a big conversation where there are lots of different ways to do things, and lots of different points of view, and about things about which we feel pretty passionate. And so I think the challenge for all of us is going to be to stay in the conversation, especially with people that see things differently than we do. And so I like that you're bringing these things up, because I think we do need to stay aware of all the different pieces of the conversation. And this is an important one.
I think so too. Well, and I just, I'm all about freedom, and there are a lot of people who don't feel comfortable with it. And I just feel like, I hate to see this, because what it makes me feel like is that people's freedom, when they're telling you, oh, you can only see two people, this is a control thing. And I hate that people are losing their freedoms. I think that's the biggest thing. But anyway, well, let's move forward to our conversation here. I want to say that Dr. Ford has been practicing psychotherapy in private practice for more than 20 years. And she's received her MD from Brown University Medical School and completed her psychiatry residency at the Stanford School of Medicine. And she offers workshops for couples, teams, and therapists throughout Stanford continuing studies. I just have to ask you the question, how did you get into this?
How did I get into this?
Yeah.
I've asked myself that question. I think I've always seen human beings as being very interrelated. Tony Kushner, the famous American playwright, said the smallest human unit is two. And that always seemed very real to me, not just human beings. I mean, we know now everything on this planet is very interrelated. And so it was natural to me to think in terms of human systems as opposed to just an individual.
Oh.
After I took my training in psychiatry, for a while I saw both couples and individuals, but increasingly I felt like, especially when I was working with individuals that were in a serious partnership, only part of the person was in the room. And I started to feel like I could have more of an impact if I was working with both of them at the same time, rather than just one person where I'm working with them for maybe an hour. And then they go home to this very thick, important relationship with this other person for the other, 24 days and,
Yeah.
24 hours a day. And so it occurred to me that relationship was going to be far more influential in what was going on. Furthermore, of course, the main things that people would come in and talk to me about was their major relationships, because that's what we care about. So at a certain point, I just did a right turn and decided from now on, I only see couples. And that's what I've been doing for the last 20 years. And it's been fascinating. And, I believe in relationships. I believe that all of our important adult learning happens in our important relationships, whether it's a couple or your adult kids or other people that you count as really close into you. And so it's kind of a pleasure and a privilege to be able to learn about that, and also to be able to help people with it.
Yeah. You know what surprised me when I was looking at some of the information that you sent over? 8.2 years is the average length of a marriage in the US.
Yeah. It's not very long, is it? And
No.
but it's not changing. I mean, that's been true for a while. It slid down a little bit, but actually we're kind of steady at that kind of level of marriage length. And I think some of that is, we get training in all kinds of things, but we don't get a lot of training in how to be in these really close, important relationships. And furthermore, I often say that being married is it's like a magic show. The important stuff is kept out of sight. And so it's a lot of things we can learn by watching other people, right?
Yeah.
But being in close-up relationships, especially the kind that we refer to as marriages, we don't get a chance to see how people work it out and how it is they do what they do. And, the common experience that a lot of people have is they find out that a couple friend of theirs is separating, and they're shocked. Why are they shocked? Because all of the gritty stuff that was
The
happening.
facade was all great, but the inside, nobody really knows.
So I think it's really important that we learn about how to be couples. And when I'm working with people, I tell them, think of me as a coach. You're going to be interacting with each other in the room, and I'm going to be kind of the line coach, and I'm going to be talking to you from the sidelines. But the main thing is that you learn to talk to each other.
Yeah, and I think people aren't honest with each other, and that is something that you talk about. You also say 95% of Americans will at some point in their life attempt this amazing feat, which I think is great, because people want to get married. People want to be in love. They really do. I think, and I'll just throw this out there, I think a lot of times people want to be in love more than they want to be in love with the right person.
Yes, that can trip you up, huh?
Do you see that a lot?
Feels really good is, as most people learn, it's a short-term pleasure. And so to stay feeling in love in that particular way that you do when you first have a crush, you can get into a pattern of just going for the in love feeling, as opposed to being in a relationship where you're learning how to love and be loved. And those are not the same thing.
Yeah, because in the beginning, everything's great.
Mm-hmm.
But then as time goes on, the honeymoon's over. In fact, you even say that, what happens when the honeymoon's over and you're back to reality. And I think a lot of this, and I'll just say this, I think a lot of times people aren't honest with their partners as far as what they're really feeling. They want to put on that facade and show a different persona than who they really are. Do you find that a lot? Because I feel that.
Yeah, we have to take big risks to tell each other what we're really feeling, especially if it's something we're not particularly proud of, or if we're afraid that the other person may judge us for it.
Right.
So the fine art of figuring out how to take those risks in a way that helps the relationship build and grow is really important. I was just working with a relationship this morning, actually not a couple, an adult child and parent.
Okay.
And I've been working with them for a few weeks and it's going quite well. And I realized the reason it's going quite well is that each of them, they had been estranged for a while. Each of them is figuring out a way to take risks in a kind of a measured way, and then to give each other really good feedback. When the risk taking goes well, they're very prompt to kind of congratulate each other about, wow, that went really well. That was a hard piece of conversation. And likewise, when it doesn't go well, they're very good at quickly saying, you know, that didn't work for me, what you said there, and here's why. And so that whole process is part of how they're rebuilding their relationship. And the same thing applies for couples, is the risk taking is really an inherent part of how you build trust. You don't build trust without the risk taking. And this thing of the facade you're talking about,
Yeah.
basically you end up with a relationship that's not very strong because it hasn't been tested. You haven't had those moments of figuring out how do you get through the tricky parts together. You've been protecting yourself and the relationship from the tricky parts.
Hey, you guys, we got to go to commercial break. I'm here today with Kathryn Ford. We're talking about relationships. This is High Road to Humanity, and we'll be right back. Hi, this is Nancy. You're out. This is High Road to Humanity. I'm here today with Kathryn Ford. We're having a wonderful conversation about relationships. Now I'm going to read something that I felt was key. I circled it. It says, here is the secret. Everything and the grand adventure of being a couple depends on your openness to each other in the moment, your emotional aperture, and your ability to sense that openness in each unfolding moment, your aperture awareness. This is the superpower perfectly designed to steer us through the many dark and stormy moments. Now, talk about this. How did you come up with this verbiage, and where did this come from? Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, being a therapist is a little bit like it's a little bit of the laboratory, because as you go along, you know a lot of things, you know, you have a lot of tools to use, and you're trying to figure out what is going to be the most helpful. And so the natural process whereby you start to pay attention to what is it I'm steering by? What is helping me to be helpful to these couples? And as I started to really focus in on that question, I realized that the most helpful thing in a session, I mean, after all, both for a couples therapist, but more so for each of us in our own couples, being in a couple is a very complicated thing. And so you can get lost in the complexity and kind of confused about, well, what do I pay attention to? Where do I go? As I started to pay more and more attention to what was I steering by, I realized it was paying attention to whether or not these two people were open to each other as they were trying to talk about tricky things. And that if I kept my eye on that, I couldn't go very wrong. And I then gradually began to coach the couples to pay attention to that also. And one day, in trying to describe for them what I meant, I said, you know, it's sort of like there's this aperture, which is kind of the word we use in photography for the opening and closing of a lens. And I said, it's sort of like there's this aperture between the two of you, and you need to make sure that that's open. And if it's not open, you're going to do something different than if it is open. And then we would talk about what that was. But I grabbed for that word, and it worked so well that I just continued to use it. But basically, it's how emotionally open are you at the moment. And what that's very different from is that when people are trying to talk to each other and the conversation gets difficult, there are two main patterns that I saw that don't work very well. Okay. One is some people who are very kind of mental and they know a lot about psychology, maybe they start to grab for their mental models of, well, what does this mean about my childhood? What does this mean about your attachment style? What does this mean about your personality? And so they get up all in their heads trying to figure it out. I have to tell you for sure that doesn't work. And so,
it's about emotions, isn't it? It's about how you feel.
Models are very important.
Yeah.
But when the conversation gets difficult, the most important thing you can do is put that aside and just ask yourself, am I open or closed right now? And furthermore, is the person I'm talking to open or closed? And if you're open, fine, good to go. But usually you think to ask yourself that question because things are closing down. And if they are, you need to stop and do certain things to help each of you reopen. And the other counterproductive thing people do when things get really complicated and tricky is they just shut down and they kind of abandon the project. And that's the person that just kind of starts rolling their eyes, spacing out, whatever kind of thing. And that obviously doesn't work either. So you have to learn to really stay present with open or closed. And if you're open, good to go. If you're not open, then you need to kind of press pause on the conversation and talk to each other about what is needed for us to reopen around this difficult topic.
As you're talking, I'm thinking, the root of everything is love. And in our society today, and when I see these statistics, people are so afraid to be open, number one, like you talk about. They're also, it's all about me, and not really considering the other person. And I feel like we've gotten to a place, now you can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what I feel. I feel like we've gotten to a place in society where we're not so kind and compassionate to each other. And we think, and there's a difference between caring about yourself and loving yourself and being, overly, how can I put this? About yourself, I guess. A lot of times we don't consider the other person's feelings or, and really, I mean, honestly, what I've learned more than anything, it really boils down to compassion and understanding and loving a person enough that you may not like what they're saying to you,
right,
but you take it, and try to understand. I just feel like the love, the true, love somebody no matter, who they are or what they say. Do you see a lot of that missing? Because I feel like we've gotten so superficial that the real core of being together, the love, is kind of like lost. I don't know.
Sort of lost track of the fact that really the best way not only to take care of each other, but to take care of ourselves is to be open and loving. So it's not like, oh, I'm going to be unselfish and I'm going to look after you instead of myself. In fact, especially in major relationships, the best way to get your needs met and to feel good and have a sense of well-being in that relationship is if both of you are taking care of both of you. And that's the love. And I think somehow we've taken a wrong turn somewhere and started to fail to sense the connectedness. And that's part of what I'm saying when I say people need to tune in to open or closed. If I'm truly open, that's probably the strongest trigger for you to be open. It's very hard to, if I'm closed, it's going to be hard for you to be open. And so we need to realize we're not really that separate, and my vibes influence you and vice versa. And taking good care of you and loving you and being compassionate with you is actually the best way to take care of myself, because I'm not really separate. And if you're not doing very well, I'm not doing very well either.
Right.
And I really believe that that's true about all of us, even people that don't know each other very well, like you and I just met this morning. But I really believe that's true of all of us. But then especially as it gets closer in to kids and parents and spouses, of course that's true. And it's not an either or thing of either you do well or I do well. It's always all the same thing. And start to realize that that's true and move out of this adversarial kind of view of what relationship is back into something that is what's really true, which is that we need each other, love each other, and feel things for each other.
Yeah, we do. We need each other. Let's talk a little bit about the vibration, because I'm really big into energy, and we are energy and we are energetic souls. And, you can feel if somebody is not being honest or open. If somebody doesn't have an open heart, you can feel it. They don't have to say a word.
Exactly.
And do you see a lot of that where I don't know why I'm picking this up, but I feel like a lot of people come into your office and they're very tense, and it probably takes a long time for them to even open up to you and to each other. That's opening your heart is what it's doing. And
Yes.
Yeah. Do you find that's that people come in closed and that the vibration is tight and it's really, negative, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Well, I would say that's your first job as a therapist, whether you're working with couples or individuals, is the person walking in your door is a little bit closed naturally. This is a strange situation. You're a stranger in the beginning, and they've come in with a problem. So they've come in with a problem to a stranger. And your first job as a helper, as a therapist, is to be very open and very compassionate yourself, because, as you said, that vibe is going to carry the day. We're very resonant with each other. One of the analogies I use for this when people have trouble understanding what I mean is, I know that you don't because you work with this all the time, but some people, this is a new idea.
Yeah.
And what I point out to them is, if you imagine a room full of drums, if you hit one drum head, all the drums vibrate. And that's who we are with people, with each other as human beings. If I'm vibrating in a certain way, if I'm very nice and open and that vibe is coming out, you're going to feel that. And as you said, you're going to feel it separately from what I might say. There's going to be a sensation of that. And we have that sensation quite naturally. Our brains are very wired to sense that kind of emotional tone from other human beings and even from animals. And we just have to relearn to tune into it, because people have sort of stopped paying attention.
I know.
And the information is very there, and our brains are all set to do that. And we just have to kind of tune the dial so that we pay attention to that ability to sense that. And that's very related to what I tell people when I say pay attention to, are you open or closed? And do you feel the openness or closeness of the other person?
Right. Do you see, I talk about narcissists a lot on my show. I'm an empath, and you probably know what an empath is. I'm very empathetic, and we're drawn towards narcissistic people, unfortunately, because we want to take care of everybody until we figure it out. Do you see a lot, and the reason I'm asking you this is because I see it a lot. I do readings, I'm a psychic. You may not know that, but I do readings for people, and I see a lot of this narcissistic behavior with an empath. And we've got a couple minutes before we go to break. Can you address that real quick?
I don't know if I could address it really quick.
Okay, well then let's talk about it when we come back. Let's talk about it when we come back from break. Because I have to say, this comes up a lot in my readings. And so I want to know what you think about it. You guys, I'm here today with Kathryn Ford. She's a medical doctor. She is a couples, do you call yourself a couples therapist? Is that right?
Call myself a couples therapist, and my medical training is as a psychiatrist, so it's not too far away from where I started. But yeah, I'm a psychiatrist specializing in working with couples.
There you go. This is Nancy. You're out. This is High Road to Humanity, and we'll be right back. Hi, this is Nancy. You're out. This is High Road to Humanity. I'm here today with Kathryn Ford. Kathryn, my question is, do you see a lot of the narcissistic, empathic? And the reason I asked, and I was telling you on the break, I see a lot of empaths on the planet right now. I believe we're all here to help humanity. But we're so nice, that we don't always see the narcissist coming. And it feels like, and then I'll let you talk, there's a lot more narcissistic people because we become so materialistic and so egocentric, I guess. So talk to me about this. What are you seeing in your practice?
Yeah, I think that narcissism has become, how should we say, culturally supported. And culture, especially in this country, but in lots of countries, and I think a little bit globally, we've shifted to thinking that it really is all about taking care of number one. And as I said before, that's a gross misunderstanding of who we are. There's no way we can take care of number one without being truly connected and taking care of other people. So the culture has turned in a narcissistic direction, as if it's just fine to emphasize, more for me and never mind about you. And do empaths gravitate to that kind of person? Yes, I think empaths gravitate in general to people that they sense need a loving connection. The problem there is that some people can respond to a loving connection, and with a very extreme narcissist, part of what's so frustrating in the relationship is that they have trouble really responding to a loving connection. That thing of the drum heads vibrating, their drum head is kind of screwed down really tight, and they don't feel the vibrations very easily. And that can be very tricky. And the empath starts to vibrate more and more strongly, hoping to get something going, and it just doesn't work. And it's sometimes for the empath, it can be very hard to recognize that you don't have the power to overcome the other person. And in fact, that's a good thing. We don't want to be overcoming each other.
Right.
You know, you can do what you can do on your end to be open, to be loving, and to put out that loving vibration. But if the other person is truly kind of chronically closed down to it, at a certain point you realize this is all that they're capable of. And again, with love and compassion, you may have to step away.
Right.
And that's what it amounts to sometimes, is figuring out, how do I pull out of this relationship with love and compassion?
I just wondered if you saw a lot more of this, because I do a lot more people who have had this situation, you know, but I've also seen a lot of people walk away and stand up. And so I see the strength there too. So, I mean, I see both sides of it. You know, you say here, what love, you ask, or you put down here, what love really looks like in a successful relationship. What does it look like?
In a set, I would say, I always put number one, when people say, what's the most important, when they're looking for the partner, the most important thing in a partner, I say, make sure that you find somebody that's interested in learning, because none of us know how to be a good couple when we first get together with somebody. We learn to do that together over time. And what can take a relationship down is a lack of interest in that learning.
To grow it, to grow the relationship to the next level is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Okay.
We put a little bit too much emphasis on finding the right person, and not enough emphasis on learning together to be together. And so I put learning number one. And then number two, I would probably put this thing of true love. What that looks like is you count the other person's well-being on the same level with your own. Not higher than, not lower than, but in order
equal.
In order for me to do well, we both have to do well. In order for me to be happy, you need to be happy. And therefore, at certain moments, I'm going to need to emphasize the other person's happiness if they're going through a particular difficult time, or if there's a particular goal they need to achieve, you know, on the way to where they're going. And so that's probably number two, is in a really successful couple, they've figured this thing out of, we're not really separate. We really both need to take care of both of us. And I would say those two things go a long way towards describing what's successful in couples that really have a great relationship.
Yeah. Well, being in tune enough to know, and compassionate enough to know if the other person needs your support, when to give it, you know, not to overdo. It's a balancing act, I think. You know, you say there's two big mistakes that couples make that drive them apart. What are they?
That's what I was referring to earlier, which is that when the going gets tough, some people start to overthink it, and they go up into their heads and try to figure out, why is this happening and what do I need to do? And the other mistake is to just kind of give up and go limp and forget about it. And, you know, what you need to do is stay fully present and open and learning and humble about the fact that whatever's going on, it probably is going to lead you to a piece of learning. And that's kind of humbling. I mean, we all get a little sensitive. Somehow we develop, a lot of us, this sense that we should already know everything we need to know. But of course, that can't possibly be true. We're constantly learning and growing. And so the most important thing is to be open to, I often say, the difference between a couple that's thriving and a couple that's not doing well is, have they figured out how to turn their problems into learning? And that's the key. And so at a moment where things are really tough, you have to be open enough to also be open to your own foibles, your own mistakes, to be able to be aware of
to
learn about.
Yeah, to grow. I think that's it. I think it's growing. I mean, you can't stay stagnant.
Exactly.
You know, and that's really good advice. Thank you for that. That's really good advice. You have down here the myth that people can't change. Is there, do you think people can't change? What do you think? Talk to me about that. Are people that rigid in their own way that they won't change or can't adapt, or what? What do you think?
Well, I obviously believe people change a lot. Otherwise I wouldn't have a job. No, but it is maybe the single question that I'm asked the most often, usually in the context of people being frustrated and worried that they're not going to make it, and they'll come in and they'll say, I don't know, maybe people just can't change, because they've become discouraged about whether or not they can figure out what they need to figure out as a couple. And what I point out is that we all, in a certain way, believe in learning. We do all kinds of things to learn, and learning is change, and all change is learning. And yeah, we're built, we've discovered in the last couple of decades that our brains, which 2 decades ago, we thought that the brain was kind of a stagnant thing. It grew and developed age, 0 to 18. And then after that, you had the brain you had. The new neurology has told us, new neuroscience has told us that there's something that's practically infinite about neuroplasticity, is the word they use for it. And what that means is the brain is an organ designed to change, and it's constantly reworking itself. And so
That's cool.
that means is we're going to be constantly learning how to better communicate, how to tune into our openness better, how to be compassionate when we need to. And that's what we're designed to do. And we don't have to change to be the person that can change. That's who we are.
That's interesting. You said that you also counsel, mother and daughter, or siblings, that kind of thing, and it's tough. Everybody has, I think everybody has kids, and they try to, the moms try to stay out of the kids' business and try to not to, put their 2 cents in unless they're asked. I've got a couple daughters right now, and we've got a little sibling rivalry going right now. And it's tough as a mom. Any suggestions? I'm asking for advice here, you guys.
Any suggestions about how to be the mom in that situation?
Yeah, because it's really hard. You love your kids, and my kids are grown. I have grandkids, but they're both in their 30s, and they're having this, they're 4 years apart. And I try to stay neutral. And here's the biggest thing I'm trying to teach my kids, and I want you to talk about it, because I think we should all teach our kids this. Don't be judgmental of each other. They're very judgmental of each other. And I want you to talk about this, because judging is really something we need to stop. And I know you've run across this. So what kind of advice do you give somebody like me who's having kids like this that are going back and forth?
We have a lot of judgmentalness, and usually if we see somebody being judgmental of somebody else, we have to know that it starts with being judgmental of themselves. And that's the word of judgmentalness, is that we go around judging ourselves as opposed to being accepting and compassionate with our own difficulties and weaknesses and places that we need to grow and are struggling to do that. So, as the mom, what I would encourage you to do is just to hold that what you really want is for these 2 young women to have the best possible relationship. And you just keep putting out that message and hope that they will figure out how to listen to each other, how to value each other, and staying neutral. That's very helpful. And hopefully they will start to figure out that this judgmentalness is both a judgmentalness of each other, but also a judgmentalness of themselves. And where's the place for, what I think of as radical self-acceptance, where you realize that, we all just are very flawed human beings doing the best we can, including the best we can to grow and learn. And we do need to be very accepting of the difficulties of that for ourselves and each other, and be supportive when things are hard and when somebody's making mistakes or can't figure something out.
Yeah, I think it's like that with siblings, because they all want mom's attention, and they all want mom and dad's attention. And so she did this. It's funny, to watch it as they grow older. They're like, still do it. I'm like, come on, you guys, you're older now. You don't need to do this anymore. But that's true. I guess we do judge ourselves. Do you see a lot of that in your practice?
Yeah, I think that that's the basis of a whole lot of the defensiveness that we have with each other, is that inside we're holding ourselves to a standard that is just, the standards we hold up for ourselves and for our relationship needs to include the learning piece. I often ask people to tell me their vision of their relationship. And the same goes for our relationship with ourselves. What's your vision of who you want to be? And a grand vision for who you want to be is great. We need a lot of inspiration in life. We need it about who we're trying to make ourselves into, and we need it about what we're trying to do with our relationships. But the vision has to include, this is what we're learning to do, not this is who we are.
I love
And
it. Hey,
back in, that's where it is.
it's all about learning. I like this. We got to go to commercial break. I want to use this for the podcast too. You guys, I'm here today with Kathryn Ford. We're talking about relationships. This is Nancy Yearout. This is High Road to Humanity, and we'll be right back. It's Nancy Yearout. This is High Road to Humanity. We're on our last segment here with Kathryn Ford. Kathryn's telling me on the break that she's been blogging. I want to hear about what you've been doing. Tell us.
Yeah, so I'm blogging a couple different places. I have blogs on my own website, which if people want to go there, it's kathrynfordmd.com.
Okay.
And you'll see a lot of different things there. Like as soon as our conversation goes live, you'll see a link to that.
Nice.
And the other place I blog is for Psychology Today. So if you go to Psychology Today and look for the blog posts, you'll find my most recent one is about how to deal with COVID and the holidays, because what's going to happen, and what is happening already after Thanksgiving, is we want to be with our relatives and friends. In fact, we want more than ever to be with them, because last year we couldn't,
Right.
By and large. And families are like any other group. We have very different ideas about what's safe and how to be together and safe at the same time. And so this is the perfect opportunity to learn to have hard conversations. And I put it that way because I do believe that this is learning to have hard conversations is the single most important thing to do to improve your relationships. One time, somebody who wasn't in a major relationship said, I want to be in a major relationship. Tell me what I should be doing to prepare for that. And I said, look for every opportunity you can to have a hard conversation with somebody, because that will serve you the best once you do find somebody special that you want to have a more serious relationship with. So the COVID conversation of the holidays is the perfect opportunity, because you're coming together with someone that you care about. Let's say a distant cousin that you're so excited to see, around the Christmas table. And yet that cousin insists that everybody has to be masked, and you insist that nobody should be masked.
I know. And this is going on right now, by the way.
You have that conversation, and that comes down to this thing of how do you be in a dialogue where you truly listen to each other and count as very important not only the other person's opinions, their thoughts, but also their feelings about it, and where you manage to have a conversation where I like to say everything's put on the table and nothing is taken away, and you really look at all these different feelings and points of view as having an equal right to exist in the world. And that's where you're going to get the best problem solving. I don't know how the cousins are going to figure out whether to mask or unmask, but what I do know is they'll do the best job possible of that if they can have that kind of open dialogue with each other.
Well, yeah, because this is a really big thing right now. I mean, the country is completely divided on this one. There are people, I go to the store, and there are people, I'm in New Mexico, so we are supposed to wear them when we go into a store. I see people who just don't want to. I do it because of courtesy. I don't know if it really does anything, but I do it out of courtesy. I think some of the older people I see in the grocery store seem afraid, and I hate that. I just hate that, because I can pick up their energy, and I hate that there's such argument. But I guess I love what you say, because you have to respect. I think that's what this is. You have, even though you don't agree with somebody, you have to respect their opinion. I have that a lot on my show. I'll have a guest on, and they won't agree with what the audience might agree with. And then, I get these comments, but just the reason I do these shows is so I can get different opinions and different perspectives, and not to judge, and to see what we can do to make things okay. Because Christmas dinner can be either hellish or it can be peaceful at this point. What do you think?
By the way, it's not just around COVID. The families have to learn to talk about these things.
I know.
The way you feel about the fact that your mother still calls you by your baby nickname, right? I mean, there are multiple things that families have to talk to each other about that are hard conversations that have nothing to do with COVID. We've been there forever. And this is the essence of being related to each other, is how do we deal with these differences in a way that really keeps the loving connection going.
Yeah. Well, and if again, I'm back to kindness. I think, we all need to stop and go within and think before we speak. I
Yeah.
think that's the biggest thing. I'm learning to do that myself. And it's a practice. You really have to change how you can't just spew and say, think, be considerate about what you're going to say, be kind, be compassionate. That's probably what you tell your people too, right? Is that what you tell people, to be kinder and nicer to each other?
Kinder and nicer, and this thing of stop and think. We need to take very seriously that we do take each other very seriously when we're talking. The
Mhm.
power of speaking to each other is enormous. And so we need to take that very seriously and assume the other person is going to listen and they're going to be affected by what we say next. And we want to be thoughtful and constructive about that power, and that when we speak, in addition to saying what's on our mind and maybe expressing our opinion, we do it in a way that again helps the other person stay open to us, because after all, if we don't keep that in mind and they close down, they're not going to hear us anyway.
Anyway, yeah.
And the most important thing is, can you speak in a way that helps the other person be open to what you have to say?
I think so. And we're so quick to spew, and people don't realize, and I want to talk about this just a little bit more. I wrote a whole book on energy and the power of the spoken word. And it's the vibration that goes out. And that vibration, when you say something nasty or negative to somebody, believe it or not, that vibration goes out to the universe and it comes right back at you. So it doesn't do you any good. And what I've been working on, I want to ask you about this because we got about 5 or 6 more minutes. I've been working on retraining my mind and reprogramming, and to change your thoughts. When you get a negative thought, or when you get a judgmental thought, or when you get a nasty thought, go, no, change that. Do you work with that with people? Is that something that you do?
Yeah, we talk to ourselves a lot, and sometimes we tell ourselves very negative things. And so the ability to start to observe that,
Right.
it really starts with being able to see what's happening. In fact, I sometimes think that that's all change is just really seeing something very well and accurately. The effort to change it after, once you've seen it, is pretty light actually, compared to the effort to just really notice what's going on. And so, yeah, the ability to watch your belief system playing in your head, like I'm not going to tell you what I'm thinking because I know the last time I did that, you used it against me, for instance. Well, that's something you're telling yourself that's going to bias what's going to happen next. And why would you want to do that if you're spending the effort to try one more time to talk to this person, right?
Right.
You don't want to tell yourself that it's a useless effort, right? And so that's an example, I think, of changing our thinking and catching ourselves in the act of telling ourselves things that aren't helpful, that may or may not be true, and to really just leave an openness to, let me see what's really going to happen here, as opposed to telling myself a story about it that gets in the way of my, again, paying attention in the moment to what's actually happening.
Yeah, and you keep talking about living in the moment, and I love that. And I want you to address it because, that's really it. Not thinking about, and that goes along with what I was talking about, your thoughts, not thinking about what happened in the past, not worrying about what's going to happen in the future, but living right now in the present moment. That is really the key. And have you found that in your practice as well?
Yeah, that's what I do when I'm working with people, and that's what I encourage them to start to learn to do. We do spend way too much of our time in the past and in the future. Eons ago, human beings learned to abstract, and we learned to be else than the present moment. We learned to think about the future. We learned to think about the past. And in doing that, we got so good at it that we kind of forgot how to just be in the present moment, so much so that now we're all having to relearn, present moment. Wait, what is that? And in fact, there was a really cool study done by a couple of psychologists that put an app on people's phone, and when the app would signal them several times a day, and when the signal went off, they were supposed to record two things. Three things. what were they doing? What were they thinking about? And then how happy were they?
Oh.
And what the results was that more than half the time, we're not thinking about the thing that we're actually doing. They're two different things. So we're
Hey.
overthinking one thing and overthinking a different thing.
Right.
Or that when those two things are not connected, that's when we're not happy. So among the benefits of being in the present moment, which means paying attention to what's happening right now, is that we actually feel better when we do that. And we fail to notice that these thoughts of past and future usually involve an anxious element, an unhappy element. Gee, I wish that hadn't happened, or let me be sure that I can get it right tomorrow. And that actually we're a lot happier when we just take in what's going on in, as one of my Buddhist teachers says, this wonderful present moment. And learning to do that is so simple, and yet we have to retrain our brains to do that, because we're so good at this other there and then thinking instead of here and now thinking.
Yeah, that's wonderful advice. Thank you for that. That was a wonderful analogy. You guys, if you're going to be happier, live in the present moment.
Exactly.
It's a practice. I have to work at it. I will tell you, and I have to catch myself. But I love what you say. You start to be aware, and I've been aware for a while. And once you're aware, that's half of it. That's half the battle, right? Well, listen, we got to get out of here for today. Kathryn, if people want to get in touch with you, give out your information, please.
Yes. You can find me at kathrynfordmd.com. That's my website. You can also find me on the Psychology Today blog post. And right now, I usually teach a course through Stanford Continuing Studies, something about relationships or couples. And my next course will be, it's open for registrations now, and the dates are January the 22nd and 29th. So if you'd like to sign up for that, you can find a link to it on my website, or you could go to the Stanford Continuing Studies Program website, and you'll find it there.
What's the name of the course?
That course, I think, is something about present moment connection.
Oh, okay, perfect. That's great.
But go to my website and you'll see it listed, probably even on the homepage. I think it's something like Connecting in the Present Moment, Relationships Made Simple. There you go.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you for coming on. You're a wealth of knowledge, and thank you. You've given us some really wonderful information.
Great to be with you today. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Hey, you guys, we got to get out of here for today. If you want a psychic reading, go to my website, nancyyearout.com, click on the book button. I can't talk today. And you can go to my calendar and book your date and time. Thanks for joining us today. Everybody take care and God bless.
Connect the dots and keep the motion. Can achieve your goal. Let's hit the higher road.
Hey, you guys, join me next week on The High Road for more stories filled with wisdom, love, and hope for our future. Have a fabulous week, and know that by staying on the high road, you will make it to your destination. Visit my website, nancyyearout.com, where you can book a private session to learn how to tap into your own abilities. And check out my YouTube channel. It's Nancy Yearout's High Road to Humanity.
You can achieve your goal.